based on a knock-knock joke, so I'm just going to tell you the knock-knock joke. It's not really funny, but it's very poignant. It's very deep, okay? Knock-knock.
Who's there?
God.
God.
God, how do I know it's you? That's the question for this morning. God, how do I know it's you? How do I know whether this idea that I have is a divine idea or my mind chatter idea? How do I know the difference? How do I know that this decision I am about to make is right, is correct, is the good decision? How do I know this? What direction do I go in? How do I know? Science of Mind textbook, Ernest Holmes tells us this over and over again. There is something within us that knows, and that's what I want to get into this morning. There is something within us that knows. The Bible tells us, the Father knoweth what things you have need of even before you ask. Even before you ask, because the good is already present. That, even before prayers are prayed, it's answered. Even before the thoughts are really finished and completed, it's already there. The good is already present before the question is asked. Wow, how can we not know that this is a magnificent, energetic presence of this divine energy, this loving force? And those are wonderful and comforting words. Those words really, they feel good, but how do we know the answers? We think we're hearing the right answer. How do we know that the solution that seems to appear is the right solution? And so we search for a way to know. We're always searching. We're searching for a way to know. Everything is within. That's the end of the talk, so I'll lead up to that. I gave you the answer at the end. But you know that. It's always an inside job. It always is. One way we might do this is to ask for a sign. Anyone ever do that? I know I have. Give me a sign, God. You know, it's like imploring. Give me a sign. Illustrated in a book whose title actually inspired today's theme. It's by a really great guy, Dan Wakefield. How do we know when it's God? That's the name of the book. A woman's going out with the same man for several years, but doesn't know if she should marry him. She prays, she asks for a sign, and then she's sitting on the floor in her living room trying to pray even more about this. Should I marry him or not? And she sees what she thinks is a sign. The sunlight is streaming in and falls on the carpet. It seems to spell out the first letter of his name. Is this a sign? The first letter of the man's name? Is this guidance she is praying for? Is it God's way of telling her to marry the man, or is it simply the sun shining on the carpet? These are the things we look for and we put meaning into. And do you see yourself in any of that? We all wrestle with the question, what's the right thing to do? Many times in our lives. And despite the assurances we are given by Holmes and by the Bible and from other sacred texts, we still search, we still pray, we still meditate, we still look for those signs. Apply logical tests, the cons, the pros, if you're of that kind of brain. My brain doesn't function that way. Here's the cons and here's the list of the pros. We see therapists, we see practitioners, all because we want someone to give us an answer. We are not really listening. We're not listening, and we still don't know. So, if only God would speak to us and boom out those instructions from a voice on high, we would gladly follow if we only knew. When we're looking for this kind of guidance and wisdom from God or Spirit that theologians call discernment, and if you saw yourself in any of those examples I just gave you, then you might take comfort in knowing that people throughout the ages has searched for discernment. Religious leaders and even saints have spent most of their lives trying to learn not only how to do it themselves, but also how to teach others. We see this with all the motivative speakers and books and everything else, showing us how to be happy, telling us actually how to be happy, how to manifest, how to do all of these things. So in his book, we're going to get the answers to all of these in a minute. In his book, How Do We Know When It's God?, Dan Wakefield relates this story. I'm going to go through this fast. This is St. Ignatius of Loyola. He lived in the early 1500s and founded the order of the Jesuits. If you went to Catholic school and you're a boy, you know who they are. So the Jesuits, he is considered by many to be the greatest authority on discernment in the Christian tradition. He even wrote a book on it, and it's called Rules of Discernment of Spirits. And yet he had difficulty discerning for himself. It is told that although he was able to discern from daydreams that God was leading him into a new way of life, and the Madonna came to him in a vision, he still couldn't decide whether or not to kill a Moor, M-O-O-R. He didn't believe the Moor didn't believe in the birth of the Virgin Mary. He could not discern if it was the right thing for him to do to go and defend the honor of Madonna. This is whoever it is. Who's this? St. Ignatius. This is St. Ignatius. In an argument about the subject, the Moor saw how upset Ignatius was getting and wisely hurried on ahead, while Ignatius became more and more disturbed and more concerned that he had failed in his religious duty, because remember, this is the 1500s. Part of him really wanted to pursue the Moor, and he couldn't quite make up his mind to do it. He couldn't discern what to do. In other words, luckily for the Moor, Ignatius let the mule he was riding on make the decisions. And the mule did not follow the road the Moor was on. It took another road. And that to him was a sign. And Wakefield wrote, if it's that hard for St. Ignatius whether to kill a Moor in a theological argument, perhaps those of us looking for signs in patterns of the sunlight, lists of pros and cons, and asking anyone who would listen are not so hopeless after all. This is a human experience that we have. And the beauty of it is we go deeper and deeper into that knowing that we are always divinely guided. We are always pulled out of our comfort zone. We are always making decisions. And so this is the topic for this morning. The topic of spiritual discernment. How to know if we truly know. And I'm not saying that I, by any means, have surpassed scholars and religious leaders of ages and have it all figured out. But I am really inspired by the subject. How do we really know? What voice are we hearing? Because we got so many voices going on in our heads. We got a lot of voices. When I asked myself, where should we start on this journey of knowing how to know? The answer that popped immediately into my mind was this. First and foremost, we have to have a willingness to listen. To listen. Before we can attain spiritual discernment, before we can possibly expect to be guided and directed to those right decisions, before we can hope to have a knowing that our choices are for the highest and best good of all concerned, before we can feel that our actions and activities support a life that is satisfying and enjoying, we must first learn to listen. We must first learn to listen. to commit to a daily meditation practice that allows us to hear this divine wisdom. It's always moving through us, but we're so busy with the outside stuff and all these important decisions that we have to make that really don't mean that much, most of them anyway. That we're so preoccupied with all of that. We're not turning within. And we do that in meditation. We do that by going within in the silence, because that's where that voice is. That's where that energy is. It's within each and every one of us. And it allows us to hear the divine wisdom, however it comes through us. It could be a voice, a strong sense, or a strong feeling. This is the still, small voice inside that we hear about. It's there. It's there when we develop a really good relationship with it. We must be in touch with it before we can actually know it, and then it becomes our guidepost for life. It is like we just go within. We don't have to pick up the phone and keep asking everybody, what do you think about this? What do you think about it? We go within. We go within. That is our intuitive self. And so remember that animals have instinct. We have intuition. That is our gift from God. That is our gift from God. I usually make the correct decision if it feels right to me. And it is a feeling. If it feels pretty good. It doesn't have, no, if it feels right, it doesn't always feel good. Sometimes those decisions are very, very uncomfortable, but we know it's the right thing to do for us. Are we listening to the voice that is telling us that it is right for us? And another thing to realize, that this feeling right usually comes from this intelligence in our solar plexus. You hear people say, I had a gut feeling. That this solar plex, it has more intelligence in it than our heart and our minds that have the least up here, where we hear all the chatter. That's the least. So when we have that gut feeling, it's usually your innate intelligence. And sometimes I personally hear a strong voice, not too often that I can remember, but since I've started paying attention, I hear this voice. And I never ignore that voice. And when I left my marriage, that voice was so loud and so clear. It was one of those few times. It was like yelling at me. It would not let me sleep. And I was really tired. And it would not let me sleep. It said, pack your bag and go. Over and over and over. So every time I would try to go to sleep, I would hear, pack your bag and go. I just happened to have a bag in the closet where I was. I wasn't in the closet, but the bag was in the closet. But I kind of was in the closet, wasn't I? I was in the closet about my real worth and my real deservability and my real good in life. And so I decided to come out of that closet. And I decided to listen to that voice. And I knew that when I closed my front door, that I would not be walking back in that front door. And that is the way it absolutely is. And I just get in the car and drive. By the way, it was 3 a.m. Just get in the car and drive to where? I don't know, wherever Spirit leads me. Because I listen to the voice. Best decision, by the way, when you listen to those, if you get a voice that loud and clear and you don't listen to it, then shame on you. You have to be courageous. You have to trust. That's the bottom line. You have to trust the universe is always supporting you, because it truly, really is. It really, I know when we walked into this space last month, both Reverend Brenda and I knew that this is the place we'd been visioning for all those years. This is what we've all been praying for all these years. And we could have listened to a voice that said, well, this might not be the best time. You're in the middle of a pandemic here. You know, no one's going anywhere. We didn't listen to that voice. Within a week, we had the board saying, yes, yes. So it wasn't even a doubt in our minds. As I said last week, when the vision becomes your reality, you can say, but I choose not to. I've learned the hard way. Oh no, not a good time, God. Do it at a better time, you know? This is the time, this is the manifestation. That was the voice. In here, it was an energy. It was a knowing that, yeah, this meets every criteria we have. This meets everything we want, except for the sound system. Other than that, it's got everything. So it's learning how to listen, how to really get in touch with that indwelling wisdom within each and every one of us. So, Science of Mind, Ernest Holmes wrote this: the spirit within us is God, and only to the degree that we listen to and seek to obey the spirit shall we really succeed. Success, what success is. It's stepping out in trust, in absolute trust and knowing. A woman worked at a large bookstore and was often amused by the combination of books that people would purchase. She found it particularly funny when a customer approached the checkout counter one day with two bestsellers. One, Conversations with God. And the second one was How to Argue and Win Every Time. So, if you're not sure, you can do this in life. You can read both books. You can go through both experiences. Only that highest and best one might not come around again in the way that it does. So I would always advise to go within, to listen within, to that voice that is telling you, this is right, this is good, and not this, the mind, is this mind thing. Holmes also wrote, fear blocks the more complete givingness of the spirit to humankind. Fear arises from that mental attitude which limits the possibility and the willingness of spirit to give us the good we so greatly desire. Remember last week, fear, feeling excited and ready. That's what fear is going to mean to each of us every time we think of it. Being ready, getting excited, knowing it's triggering a change within us. And as I look at my fears this morning, I invite you to look at yours. What are you afraid to listen for? What are you not willing to listen to? And if you are willing, how can you move past the fear? How can you move toward the willingness? Even baby steps are okay. In fact, highly suggested, taking the smaller steps as you're guided. Eric Butterworth, Unity minister and author, offered a technique for times when guidance is needed. Close your eyes and be still, he said, and say softly with assurance, Father, I am listening. I am listening. Infinite mind, I am listening for thy guidance. Infinite mind, I am listening for thy guidance. You will get an answer. You will get the guidance. I know, I've tried it, and that's what we tell you. Try to do these things. Don't try. Do these things yourself. Test them out. They work. About this technique, he wrote this. You will find marvelous guidance manifested in you. You will feel a sense of conviction, a sense of assurance, a sense of spontaneity, and you will be led. Jesus said, behold, I stand at the door and I knock. And if any man hear my voice and open the door, I will come into him and will sup with him and he with me. As we develop a willingness to listen, are we hearing the knock on the door? Are we opening the door? Are we allowing that divine intelligence, that infinite guidance to fill us, to direct us and to guide us? Because it always will, when we let go of what we think we know. Because we don't know as much as that intelligence within us really knows. That's the genius. That's the genius. Whew. Okay, so here we go. Edward Hershey Richards wrote this. A wise old owl sat on an oak. The more he saw, the less he spoke. The less he spoke, the more he heard. Why aren't we more like that wise old bird? And here's an are we willing to listen test. I'm finishing up now. We are willing to listen when our focus is on truth, divine truth, forgiveness, and the desire to remove the blocks and resistance to the expansion of our consciousness. Because it's always wanting to expand. It's always wanting to grow and be more of. We are not so willing to listen. This is how you know the difference. Your body will tell you. Stop paying attention to the intelligence in the cells. The body will tell you we are not willing to listen when we are absorbed by our problems, when we focus on our troubles, when we work on building our defenses, and when we are always looking out there. We're not going in the right direction. This holds everything. This is what's eternal. This is what lives when these vessels are cast aside. This is the bright light of divinity within each and every one of us, shining all of the time. And think about this as you listen to the closing words from Ernest Holmes as he discusses an individual who had this willingness to listen, probably more down pat than most of us. Jesus spent most of his time communing with his own soul, he writes. For it is through our inner thought that we contact God. To this remarkable man, out of the silence of his own soul, came a direct revelation of his oneness with God. New Thought teacher he was. Oneness with God. It was all about unity. Back of the conflict of ideas. Back of the din of external life and action. Back in the innermost recesses of uplifting thought and silent contemplation, there is a voice ever proclaiming, "This is my beloved. This is my beloved." Seldom does that voice penetrate the outer world of human experience. Seldom do we allow it to perfectly express through us. We must learn to listen to that voice. This is still Holmes. Call it conscience, intuition, or what we will. It is there. No one need go unguided through life. No one need go unguided. That's a gift right there. For we are divine at the center and all are images of the Most High. We all have that intuitive voice. First and foremost, in knowing how to know, and first and foremost in mastering this idea of spiritual discernment, is being willing to listen. Being willing to listen. Are you ready? Are you ready to listen?
Yes. Yes.
Then I am complete here.